Welcome to Average Joe's Pool. So at just $38, could what we have here be the new king of budget cues? Well, we're going to find out. Let's take a look at Pathline. So first of all, who are Pathline? Well, unfortunately, we've not been able to find any information on them whatsoever. They don't even have their own website. However, what they do have is a lot of their pool cues for sale on Amazon. And additionally, because information is so scarce on these Pathline cues, it doesn't even confirm where precisely it's made. But at this kind of price point, it's probably safe to assume it's most likely made in China. And this model is available in 5 different colour options. This can be bought in red, pink, green, white, or what we have here, blue. And additionally, it is available in 4 different weight options as well, either 18, 19, 20 or 21 ounces. Now when it comes to price, this is definitely one of the Pathline's trump cards. This cue currently on Amazon is priced at just $38. And it is worth noting that Amazon do have regular special offers on these cues as well. We've seen them as low as $34. And if that's not a big enough bargain for you, Pathline also supply these in a 4-pack. So you get 4 different weight options all included in one package. And when you buy those, it's only $69 for all 4 cues. That makes them only $17.50 per cue. And if you plan to buy yourself some Pathline cues, then please note that we will have the Amazon links for these in the video description. So if this video turns out to be helpful for you, please help to support what we do here at Average Joe's Pool. Please be sure to click those links. So yes, it is cheap, but are we actually getting anything half decent for our money? Let's take a look in a little bit more detail.
You're almost romantic.
Well, it's just a passing symptom.
Now, when we're talking features, of course, our Pathline is very much in budget cue territory, so we're not going to expect all the bells and whistles in the world, but we do have a few here. So for our Pathline review cue, we actually purchased this for review from Amazon. When it came delivered, the Pathline comes in its own box, within which you will find that it comes in a clear poly bag. So overall it is a fairly simple design, but it does definitely have everything that it needs. So first of all, of course, we do have this HD graphic transfer. And we have this multiple point design in the centre of which, in this particular one, we have these blue sections to perhaps mimic turquoise, but they do come in various other colours, and it's that element, that blue element right there, that changes depending on what colour option you choose. And then for an extra bit of pizzazz, we also have some silver decorative rings. We've got one here at the end of the butt, and then also one either side of the joint. And as we can see here, we do have a completely wrapless handle. We also have the Pathline logo right here at the end of the butt cap. And additionally, we have some kind of plastic joint collar for the joint. And the pin size for our joint is 5/16 by 18. And as far as construction materials go, Pathline lists the butt as being Canadian hard rock maple and the shaft listed simply as hard rock maple. And then working our way up the cue, first of all taking a look at the shaft. Now this is actually described by Pathline as being a conical taper. However, I've got to say that I think that they're definitely selling themselves short. This is not what I would consider a conical taper, which is essentially a straight line between the joint and the tip. This does actually have a little bit of shape to it. Now we're definitely outside the parameters that we maybe considered for it to be a pro taper, but it has removed, it is slightly scooped, and it has removed enough weight out of this kind of area here. So overall, that's a pretty decent shape. And for the finish on the shaft, it's definitely been sealed. It's got a bit of a shine to it. And the last couple of inches here have been varnished with a nice straight dividing line. And then onto the ferrule. This is a slightly shorter ferrule than we might normally expect to see on a budget cue. Kind of helps to give it that slightly sportier look. This is a high impact resin ferrule according to Pathline, and it's measured in at 13.01 millimeters in length. And perhaps the defining feature when it comes to this cue is the choice of tip. What we have here is a layered pig leather tip finished in red, and that's quite a cool feature to see at this kind of price point. We might normally expect to see kind of pressed leather tips or even non-leather tips at this kind of price point, so that's definitely a cool feature. And apparently the tip that we have here is a soft tip, and it's listed at 13 millimeters, and when we measured it, actually measured in at 12.9. Now when it comes to length, as standard, this is a 58-inch cue, and the complete length, including our rubber bumper and the tip, 58 1/4 inches. However, if we deduct from that total length both the rubber bumper and the tip, 57 3/4 inches. And our complete length comprised of a butt length of 29 3/16 inches, including the bumper, plus a shaft length of 29 1/8 inches, including the tip. And for diameters, first of all measured at the butt, 32.08 millimeters, and also at the joint, 21.8 millimeters. And with regards to weight, this is the 19-ounce model that we have here, and when we weighed this in, 19.31 ounces. And that comprised of a butt weight of 15.51 ounces, plus a shaft weight of 3.8 ounces. We always like to take a look at what's happening on the inside of these cues, so of course we removed the rubber bumper. And we did find that this cue indeed does have a weight bolt in there, so we decided to go ahead and remove it and see what type of weight we had. And after a lot of unscrewing, we actually found that we have the mother of all weight bolts, a whopping 6-ounce bolt fitted to this cue. And we also weighed in that bolt for good measure, weighed in at 5.968 ounces. We also checked the cues for the centre of balance, and as you may well imagine, having that monster weight bolt in the rear does make it slightly rear heavy. And the centre of balance on this particular cue measured in at 17 inches, measured from the rear of the cue, including bumper. So that just about covers everything that we have here on the Pathline. So let's go ahead and give it its score. So when we're talking features, the Pathline really has everything that it should. And if anything, perhaps a touch more than you may expect for a cue at this price. And once again, that tip is likely the standout feature, and is quite unusual for a cue at this price to have that pigskin layered leather tip. So we're definitely seeing everything we should, and maybe a little bit more, scoring the Pathline a worthy 4 out of 5 for features.
Allow me to introduce myself, Henry Kane.
So before we move on to our play testing, which we have coming up shortly, first we're looking at straightness. And as well as a basic visual inspection, we have 3 straightness tests in store. Let's begin with test 1, the old-fashioned table roll test. And the Pathline rolls pretty well, although we did note a small amount of wobble just visible at the tip. And we also noticed that the cue had a slight imbalance, likely due to that monster weight bolt fitted to the rear. So on to test number 2, the rail roll test. And now we'll be watching the tip for wobble whilst rolling the cue along the solid rail of the table. And we can easily see that the tip is nodding away as it rolls. So this tells us things are likely not as straight as they should be. But let's check for sure with test number 3, the cue rollers. So the first thing we are seeing is that there is a very clear imbalance. And this is almost certainly not helped by having such a massive weight bolt at the rear. And as we move the front roller up to the halfway point on the shaft, we can see that we still have notable tip wobble, which is coupled with the wobble now showing around the centre of the cue. But even as we move the roller up to the front of the shaft, we're getting even more wobble at the centre of the cue, but also we've not managed to eliminate the wobble at the tip. So unfortunately, there's no question that this cue is not 100% straight and true. But to be fair, what we're seeing here is not dissimilar to the majority of sub $50 cues that we've tested, including the ASKA L2 and also the Viper Underground. And we do have to keep in mind that this is a very cheap cue indeed, scoring the Pathline a run-of-the-mill 2.5 stars out of 5 for straightness. So coming up will be play testing, but first let's take a quick look at deflection with the squirt test. And this test is run over a distance of 75 inches, which is the distance between the head spot and the rear rail when using a 9-foot table. And for this test we'll be using maximum parallel English coupled with a hard shot. And we'll repeat this test for at least 10 times on both sides to ensure we get an accurate overall average. And the Pathline actually did slightly better than expected in this test, coming in with an average of 2 5/8 inches, which is actually considerably above average, and also very slightly outperformed its key rivals, both the ASKA L2 and the Viper Underground. So the Pathline is looking pretty sweet as we continue further into testing, but we need to know how this actually plays. So let's roll the next test. So with all of our technical tests done and dusted, we can actually move on to the fun stuff, get this on the table and actually start playing some pool with it. And all products that we review here at Average Joe's Pool, we always ensure have a minimum of 5 hours full use on the table to ensure that we can give it a fair and accurate review. And so it's time to find out whether this budget wonder can walk the line. Let's play. So I've now had a good few hours use on the Pathline. I've got to say, remembering the context of this cue, it is under $50. Actually, this plays pretty damn well. Now, the first thing to point out when it comes to playing with this cue is the fact that it is very rear heavy. And you'll remember from earlier in the video when we removed the rubber bump and had a look on the inside of the cue that we had that monster weight bolt fitted on the inside. And that weight bolt was a 6-ounce weight bolt, remembering that the cue is a 19-ounce cue. So of course that means when we remove that weight bolt, the entire cue weighs only 13 ounces. Now that is a little bit unusual. It does vary a little bit from manufacturer to manufacturer, but typically what you would expect to see on a 19 ounce cue is probably either no weight bolt at all or maybe a 1 ounce weight bolt. So typically a cue without a weight bolt you'd normally expect to be around 18 ounces, whereas this is going to be closer to 13 ounces. So of course this leads to the cue being very, very heavy at the rear end. So because the rest of the cue is physically so light, the front end of the cue definitely does have a light feel to it. So what we have here with the Pathline is definitely a cue with some contrast. It's got several things that are kind of going against it, but overall the experience is pretty good. Now when it comes to the feel of the hit, it is a little bit unusual. Like I said, it is a bit lightweight up the front end. And also I did note that you're getting a little bit of vibration coming through the cue. Not enough to really affect anything, but you can feel it. And one of the standout negatives for this cue is the awful sound that it makes. It does sound like it's almost miscuing on every shot, even though you're actually getting nowhere near a miscue. Just check out this comparison between the sound of the Pathline compared to some of its key rivals. Now you may have noticed in that clip where we were just comparing the sounds that a couple of the cues that we had in there, the ASKA and the Viper, both around the $50 range, are kind of direct competitors to what we have here with the Pathline. And we have reviewed both of those cues separately in the past, with both being kind of standout cues within that $50 price range. And because I was pleasantly surprised with just how well our Pathline plays, remembering the price tag, actually went back and knocked a few balls around with the ASKA and the Viper Underground as well, because I've not played with either of those cues for some time. And the main takeaway from that is the simple fact that with the Pathline, the hit is definitely not as firm or quite as satisfying as it is playing with either the ASKA or the Viper Underground. However, that brings us back around to what must be the saving grace when it comes to the Pathline. And although the overall feel of the hit is not quite on par with some of its key rivals, the cue does play so well. And I think the biggest reason for that is going to be the tip that they've decided to fit to the Pathline. Now what we have here on the Pathline is a layered leather tip, which is described by Pathline as being soft, and it's also finished in red leather, which is pretty cool. And I really think that it's the tip that's elevated the overall experience of playing with this cue. Now with our Pathline, when it comes to chalk retention, there was a little bit of chalk retention on the cue ball for maybe the first hour or so, just as it was kind of getting a little bit worn in. But after that, the chalk retention for the cue ball was absolutely fantastic. And in that regard, the tip that we'd have here would actually probably match anything in the kind of $10 to $15 range when it comes to chalk retention on the cue ball. So that's a great result, remembering that the entire cue is just $38. And I found that the tip was particularly good to play with. Again, in the context, remembering we're talking about budget cues. On both the ASKA and the Viper Underground, they use the same tip, which is the Le Pro by Tweeton. And the Le Pro tip is quite a hard tip, and that probably goes a little bit of the distance to giving both of those cues the slightly more solid feel than what we have here. I have to say that overall, I think that this tip that we have here is probably a little bit superior to the Le Pro. Now, despite the cue sounding absolutely awful when you're hitting the cue ball, and the fact that we do have that lighter front end, I've got to say that the overall feel when it comes to things like cue ball control is very good on this cue. Yes, it's not the most able cue in the world, and you're not going to rely on it for maximum English shots. It might let you down a little bit, though I've got to say I did experience very few miscues during testing. I thought that the tip that we have here actually held particularly well when you are applying English to the ball. And remembering how cheap that this cue is, and therefore how cheap that tip must be, I actually found this is a great tip on this cue. And I do definitely feel that if this particular cue had an inferior tip to the one that we have on here, then the whole playing experience would be absolutely awful. This really does elevate the whole thing and makes it overall a pretty decent cue to play with, remembering our price point. So all things considered, remembering that what we have here is very much a cheap pool cue, I actually had a decent experience playing with it. So let's go ahead and give it its score. The Pathline was a surprisingly good budget cue to play with, but it's certainly not perfect, with the weight distribution likely being its main negative point. Additionally, there is a touch of vibration, and the sound of the hit is truly horrific. However, the tip is the saving grace here, keeping the Pathline on track as a solid playing cue for the money, and scoring it a well-deserved 3.5 stars out of 5 for performance.
For every person on one planet, there is a double on the other.
Now when it comes to quality and budget pool cues, those sometimes can be very contrasting terms, because the cheaper the cues go, you never really know what you're going to get when it comes to the build quality. But I must say that when it comes to the Pathline, one of its big redeeming features is definitely remembering how cheap this cue is, how well made it actually is. So first of all, we have this HD graphic transfer print design, and the quality of it is absolutely fantastic. There's no real problems on it at all, with one small exception, and that is not exclusive to the Pathline, but with these graphic transfers, they tend to wrap around the cue. On some of these cheaper cues, you do get a join where it comes back round and slightly overlaps or doesn't quite align. And we definitely have that visible here on the Pathline. But again, in the context of the price, that's more than acceptable. And of course, more importantly, as I mentioned, the quality of the print itself is very good. Another small feature that I really appreciated is our rubber bumper. One of my little bugbears is when you get those bumpers and they're made of really hard rubber, very much like they're made of solid plastic. So when you're moving that cue around and putting it on the floor, when these are too hard, it gives a really nasty clunk, vibrates through the whole cue. It is only a small thing, but it is a thing that really annoys me. So on a cheap cue like this, the rubber that they've used is fairly soft, and so that eliminates that simple problem. Now, when it comes to the joint, we have this joint collar here finished in white to contrast against the HD graphics. Now, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of these types of joint. I think they look a little bit cheap, but of course this cue is cheap. But more importantly, this joint didn't even come close to getting loose once during the testing process, so that was pretty good. When it comes to the fit and the finish between these components, you can just feel some of them, like these silver decorative rings. You can just catch your thumb on them, but I mean, it is very, very minor. And the transition that we have here coming from the ring at the base of the shaft, if you move your thumb upward, it just catches, but it does seem to be even all the way around. Again, very minor. And as for the joint itself, again, you can just feel it. But I mean, it is really, really small. Some of these cheap cues, you know, you can really like clack your nail on them, and we're not getting that at all here. Yeah, that's pretty damn good. Likewise, the same at the butt cap. You can just about feel that silver ring, but very, very minor. Far better than I'd expect for the price that we're paying. Now, a couple of standouts when it comes to this cue. The first one is going to be the shaft. As I mentioned before, we do have a taper. This is most definitely not conical, and we do have enough weight shaved out of this kind of area here to make it very functional. What I really liked about the quality of this is how well sealed it is. It has a nice gloss to it, very, very smooth through the hand, and that gloss has not diminished one bit during testing. And additionally, I did note that the maple itself is particularly clean. We're not seeing any kind of real knots or marks in it, and as you run your fingers up and down it, you're not feeling kind of any flat spots. You know, overall, again, like I say, for the price that we're paying, that really is exceptional. And then moving up the cue, I like the ferrule that we have here, this slightly shorter ferrule. There is, I did feel, yeah, just there, I can feel a slight kind of line in it, perhaps, as you spin it around. But overall, excellent. And the transition from the shaft to the ferrule is almost flawless. And likewise, that transition between the ferrule and the tip here, again, you know, that's close to flawless, and at this kind of price, that really is fantastic. And then, of course, we have this red coloured pigskin layered leather tip, and without question that is one of the standouts when it comes to the Pathline. The tip itself is very well finished. It's got a nice shape to it from the factory, and also throughout the testing we have absolutely zero signs of misshaping or mushrooming. As I mentioned earlier, in performance it really is a fantastic tip to play with, and without doubt this is one of the best features that we have on this cue, and the quality and the finish of it is great. So overall, for the money that we're spending, what we're getting is probably far better quality than really we should be getting. However, I would say there is one major fault when it comes to quality and the Pathline. And that's the simple fact that we have that huge 6-ounce weight bolt, which leaves us with a 13-ounce cue. Now that has the effect, of course, of making that front end of the cue, as I mentioned in performance, feeling a lot lighter. But more importantly, it's also illustrating to us just how lightweight the materials are, the wood that are being used in this particular cue are. Normally we'd expect probably at least another 4 to 5 ounces in weight, and we have that missing on the Pathline. Now if we analyse the weight of this cue a little bit further, the shaft weight was 3.805 ounces. Now that's not untypical, that's what I'd say is fairly average. And our butt came in at 15.5 ounces, and again that's fairly typical for the butt. But we do have to remember that that 15.5 ounces includes that 6-ounce weight bolt. So if we actually take that out, our butt is only weighing in at 9.5 ounces. So it's probably fairly safe to assume that the butt itself under these HD graphics is probably a very cheap and lightweight wood. Now that is a little bit unfortunate because that does throw the overall performance of the cue just off a little bit because it is so rearward heavy. But thankfully we do have those cheaper materials being used in the butt rather than our shaft. But overall, as I did mention before, remembering the price that we're paying for this cue, the overall quality really is far better than we'd expect to see. So let's go ahead and score this for quality. First and foremost, the overall quality of the Pathline definitely surpasses expectations at this price point. And no, it's not perfect, but considering its $38 price tag, this really does put to shame a number of $50 to $70 cues, which is impressive considering how much cheaper it is. The overall fit and finish is decent, and standouts for quality include the excellent finishing and seal to the shaft, and of course, yet again, the very decent tip. So we're happy to award the Pathline with a stonking and much better than it should be 4.5 stars out of 5 for exceeding budget expectations for quality. So when you're looking at key rivals for the Pathline for under $40, there's really not a huge choice out there from brands you may have heard of. Notable rivals would include Amazon's #1 best-selling pool cue, the GSE, and also models from AB Earth, both of which we have reviewed previously, and also possibly the Viper Graphstrike. But it must be said that the Pathline is a superior cue to all of these models. And it's really not until we up the budget to $50 that things start to get more interesting, as we're now into the territory of two very strong budget offerings. Firstly, the ASKA L2, and additionally, provided you're okay to go with whatever design is on offer at the time, then also the Viper Underground. And we've reviewed both of these cues in the past, and they are both excellent budget choices and play a pretty solid game for the money you're spending. And in all honesty, both of those models do play a touch better than the Pathline. But the Pathline really does cut it very close. And also, at least in my opinion, it definitely has the superior tip. And when we remember that both of those models cost considerably more than our $38 Pathline, then there really isn't much around that's likely to provide superior bang for your buck. And so awarding the Pathline anything but 5 stars out of 5 for value would be an injustice. So now it's time to award the Pathline with its official Average Joe's rating. And this is done very simply by taking the scores from across our 5 test categories and then using those to calculate the overall average. And the Pathline proves itself very worthy of budget buyers' attention, scoring an official Average Joe's rating of 3.9 stars. If your budget is on the tight side, then you'd be wise to consider the Pathline as one of your top options, simply because the Pathline offers a performance and quality to price ratio that most other brands simply struggle to match. So there's only really one question remaining when it comes to the Pathline. Should you be considering buying one? Well, if you have a very tight budget, then without doubt the answer would be yes. Because at just $38 for the Pathline, you're really going to struggle to find anything that's going to perform overall as well as this did. Now, a couple of the main competitors for the Pathline that we have reviewed previously would be the ASKA L2 or the Viper Underground. And it must be said that the overall feel that you're going to get from either of those cues is a little bit superior to what we have here with the Pathline. But at the same time, I would also say that the tip that we have on the Pathline is better than the Le Pro that's fitted to either of those 2 cues. And so, although the overall hit and feel of this may be a little bit inferior to both of those models, I think that because of that tip, it kind of puts it almost getting on an even playing field. And remembering that the Pathline is considerably cheaper than both of those models, that's quite an exceptional result. And one big thing to remember when it comes to the Pathline is that they are available in those budget multi-packs. And so these are $38 each, but if you buy the 4-pack, it's only $70. And that makes these cues just $17 a cue, and that's frankly ridiculous. Now, if we were able to review the Pathline at $17, then of course it would have got 5 stars out of 5 for everything, because that is just an exceptional price for a pool cue full stop. And remembering what we have here is actually half decent. That would be an exceptional buy. And so if you are looking to buy yourself a cheap set of house cues, maybe for when visitors come or for your kids to mess around with, then really at $17 a cue, you're not going to get any better than that. Now please do remember, if you are interested in buying yourself a Pathline, we will be adding Amazon links not only to the single cues, but for the multi-packs as well. And you'll find those links in the video description. And so if this video has been helpful for you in any way, please be sure to help support what we do here at Average Joe's Pool. Please click on those Amazon links. So thank you very much for watching and joining us here at Average Joe's Pool. It's very much appreciated. Now, before you leave us, we always ask you to do us a small favour. Please take 1 second out of your busy schedule, at the very least, to be sure to hit that like button for us. And whilst you're there, why not also hit that subscribe and switch on notifications? That way you're going to find out about all of our upcoming videos. So thank you once again, and until next time, with excitement like this, who is needing enemas?
I don't know what I saw. I don't even know if I saw anything at all.